Good afternoon. My name is James Gore. We call this little segment Explore with Gore. I'm a county supervisor here in Sonoma County, and I represent, even though we do county-wide initiatives, I represent Northern Sonoma County. I'm here with the chief of the Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District, Marshall Turbeville, also with CAL FIRE, Battalion Chief.
Good to be here.
You know, it's good to see you when it's not a fire, either a wind crazy driven event or us at night watching, bulldozers drive straight into burning infernos, watching the wind go up to 100 miles an hour and threaten our community. It's great to sit here with you at a time when we're not in crisis management. How you doing?
Good. I feel the same way. What we can do in prevention and being prepared, way more important than what we do during the emergency or after the emergency. So great to talk to you on a day like today when there's blue skies, they call it, versus when we got ash and soot and it's dirty and we can't be everywhere helping everybody at that time.
You know, one time you told a group, and I was with you at it, you said, the most difficult thing I could tell you all as a community that's suffered through multiple fires is that when you need me most, I probably won't be able to be there. As a first responder who people look to save them, what were you trying to share in that moment?
What I was trying to share is during these siege scenarios, worst case conditions, think of like a flood, something that's so extreme, so many people are calling for us to help them. We can't be everywhere. So that was partly what I was saying. The other thing was, hey, prepare yourself so you don't need me. Because when you need me, I'm going to try my best and I'm going to risk my life and all my friends are going to risk our lives, but help us help you.
Yeah.
Don't set us up for failure, set us up for success.
I think the one thing we've learned through all of these times and all of these disasters, and it gives me the chills to just think about it, is that, it's a royal the responsibility of being a resilient community. The amount of things that we've gone through having had, at least in the 12 years that you and I have worked together, I believe 9 federally declared disasters, probably 5 mega fires, 2 significant floods, maybe 3 at the same time, a prolonged drought that creates this cycle of fire, flood, drought, fire, flood, drought. We've also gone through a pandemic together, and during the pandemic had 2 significant mega fires that burnt down hundreds of homes, and we had to evacuate areas. I mean, we've been through a lot, and I just, first of all, just as everyone would say, I just appreciate the authenticity in the moment. You're one of the first people I call, and I'm one of the first people you call when it's like, hey, Gore, you got to go deal with what you deal with. And a big part of my job is to get people out of the way so you and the firefighters can do what you need to do. So here we are, right? We could talk about history. We could talk about all these other things, but I want to start with one question that people ask you and me each and every day, not just here in Sonoma County, but also throughout the West. They look at us and they say, hey, am I safe? What's different than when we got burnt down and lost 5,300 homes, 7,000 structures, and in 9 years ago in 2017, October 8th, 2017? Should I be confident in where I live? And how do you respond to folks about that?
What I tell folks is ultimately, we are safe, but we got to think about it this way. Anything we do, there's always some risk. Driving down the road, there's a risk that something bad can happen. We get in an airplane, there's risk. You live in the wildland, there's risk. You live in the area that can flood or be windy or have earthquakes, there's risk. But are we safe? Absolutely. And this is why it's all about awareness, prevention, having a plan, knowing what to do. That's why we're safe. And the single fact I'll go back to is, unfortunately, we lost lives in the Sonoma County in 2017, but no lives have been lost since in a wildfire. We've had small fires where lives were lost, but not in a mega fire. And to me, that single fact with our new evacuation zones that all came about, I think we led maybe the state in those efforts.
Good.
The things that have happened since 2017 really should have people feeling safe. And even the last several years, going back to 2020, we had the 2024 Point Fire by Lake Sonoma, but there hasn't been a bad big fire in Sonoma County. So that's people not starting fires and then staying ready, staying vigilant, having their go bags, signing up for the alerts and being ready. So we're safe. And I feel confident going into the summer fire season of 2026. It's dry, longer summers. Those are the facts. But if people don't start fires, and when a fire does occur, they know what to do. I feel confident.
What percentage of fires are started by humans?
Over 95%. In Sonoma County, probably even more because we don't have lightning, even though 2020 was a lightning siege with the Walbridge fire and the Myers.
Yeah. It's tough when you look out at a landscape and you realize that anything, if any kind of spark went up, it would burn. But there's a difference even between that and what we've called red flag warnings over the years. And when we had our first in my time as a supervisor, the big one, the Tubbs, Nuns, Pocket, the Sonoma Complex fires, nobody knew other than professionals what the heck a red flag warning was. Like the community, the wider community didn't know, and they know now. And in high fire risk areas, you actually put up a red flag. They know what that is. In the non-high priority areas, more and more people know. And what I can tell people is that if there's smoke in the air and it's not a red flag warning, you can be confident. You do not have to freak out. You don't have to lose your mind, right? If there's a red flag warning, meaning significant high winds, vegetation ready to burn, dew point, all these conditions that make it truly dangerous, then you have to think about natural disaster kind of stuff. Is that still a good way to look at things?
Absolutely. And I think what you're referring back to is October 8th of 2017. Yeah. That was the day that Tubbs, the Pocket, the fire started. People, I would say, generally were not aware of what a red flag warning was. Yeah. Even folks in the fire service here locally didn't know the fire history of this county in 1960s, 1964 specifically with the Hanley. So that was our wake-up moment, our call to action. People started paying attention, knew what a red flag is. Now we have a purple flag, which is the upper extreme event, top shelf event, not just the average red flag. So yeah, when it's warm, but specifically when it's dry and windy, expect a red flag warning. It's tricky. The National Weather Service controls that designation, so it has to have a duration of 8 hours. But every afternoon, every couple hours in Sonoma County, we have red flag conditions somewhere in this county that exists. It's just not a formal red flag. So we need everybody, if you're doing something that could start a fire, have a mitigation plan. Have a plan or don't do it. Yeah. Everybody else, pay attention.
Don't make a plan on the fly. Correct. That is not a plan. And as the old adage goes as well, is you can't, don't expect your lack of preparedness to be somebody else's emergency and priority at all times. So let's I just want to kind of sum all this up. In 2017, we got our butts handed to us, and we had maps that showed that there was going to be fire. There was fires in this area. We knew that this was a corridor. We knew all that was there. But we were also living in times that I'll just say were much more complacent than they are now. But this was at the onset of what has now been a run where over this decade, like the 20 most destructive fires in California, like 15 of them have been in this decade. So what's happened since then? Well, as you and I have talked about, we've consolidated fire districts. We've increased money into fire districts. You are out there doing vegetation management. You're putting good fire, prescribed fire onto the ground. We have evacuation zones and areas. We do planning with communities, COPE and CERT teams. We have evacuation routes that we've cut that didn't exist there before. We do vegetation management, shaded fuel breaks. We do other things. We've even done evacuation trainings for communities where we go out on a Saturday morning and wake everybody up with high-low sirens, which I never thought I would do when I first kind of got into office. So we've done all this stuff. We've done all these things, and we have increased funding, and we have consolidated fire districts so there's more efficiency. I'm really proud of the work that, because all of us can look and say we've left things better than we found them. So we can be confident in the future, right? One of the things that I often think about, and I want you to help me with this, is I call it a tale of two fires. The Sonoma Complex fires in 2019, and then that night before at the Kincade fire, when I sat with you up on the top, looking down at something called the Catcher's Mitt, which was an area that they had the fire somewhat contained. But we were expecting from the National Weather Service 100-mile-an-hour wind coming in. So this containment area of everybody throwing everything they could to try and defeat this fire, all of a sudden this Diablo wind, which means devil, goes, this desert wind comes out. And these embers just go everywhere. Why was Kincade different than, I called it Tale of Two Fires. What happened in the Kincade fire versus the Sonoma Complex 2 years later that we were able to show the world a completely different way of keeping our community safe.
So the Sonoma Complex fires were October of 2017, essentially a 12-hour wind event. But there were several fires, not just in Sonoma County, but also Lake County, Mendocino County, and in the Sierras. And after those 12 hours, it was a matter of time of getting around the perimeter of the fire and stopping the spread. Unfortunately, many homes were lost, lives were lost. 2 years later, in 2019, also October, but late October, we had the Kincade fire. At that time, that was the only fire burning in California. It was the largest fire in California for that year. And it experienced 3 wind events. So it started under a red flag wind event in the geysers or near the geysers, burned down to Highway 128 Alexander Valley. And then we had about 2 days to try to get around it. And we just couldn't because of the topography, how remote it was. There wasn't roads. And we've been doing such a great job of putting fires out. There'd been accumulation of vegetation. And then what you talk about, and we're sitting in the truck and it was windy as heck. And we're watching the catcher's mitt and it was like someone turned on the light switch and it went from just some little bit of glowing, little bit of red stuff. And then it was all over and it spotted across Alexander Valley. Luckily, Hillsburg didn't burn, but it did spread down Chalk Hill Road into Windsor, caused a mass evacuation of a lot of Sonoma County. And so it was
we
that
evacuated
second red flag.
40% of the population of Sonoma County, 200,000+ people.
Never happened before.
Never happened before. And what did that allow the fire teams to do? Instead of evacuating people and saving pets and knocking on doors and doing all those things like in 2017.
The number one thing is it gave us assurance that we didn't need to save people's lives. We didn't need to save animals because they were already gone. So I'll risk a lot to gain a lot, is our saying. But when I know there's not a life on the line or an animal on the line, then I can be safer. So that was number one. Other benefits were there's less congestion on the road. That was huge, that we didn't have a bunch of vehicle traffic. And then ultimately it happens every fire where somebody panics. Someone decides not to evacuate, and then the situation gets really bad, or they get really stressed and they call 911, and now we're forced to go try to evacuate them. So those 3 things helped us so we could focus on stopping the fire and saving as many homes as we could. And remember, no lives lost.
No lives lost. I think in Kincade, maybe 150 homes lost. And God bless those individuals, because any amount of loss is not only heartbreaking, but you do a ton of work with those individuals. But the difference between thousands and hundreds, and the difference between lives lost and none lost, was paramount. I think the other thing is that everybody I've talked to in the fire service, and for me, it agrees that Hillsburg and Windsor would have suffered significant losses if we had been in the same situation where we were on our heels instead of our toes. If we had not evacuated those places, we would not have had all that work happening in between, Parkland Farms, on the ridge. We wouldn't have been Foothill, like the teams were out there kicking down and using sledgehammers to knock down fences, wood fences, anything that would burn. They had drones going over hot spots where one house would get embers in it. And instead of that one house turning into 3, turning into 5 or 500, they were able to go in and douse it. It was just an amazing thing to see it in full action. Also, the locals said, we're not gonna be a part of the whole group. We know our community. We're gonna go be assassins and go up into the tough areas to get to and go protect our homes. It was this beautiful, inspiring event, and the biggest part of it is that we were ready, and the people that were on hand were high capacity. The Emergency Operator Center, where the people were embedded into it. It worked right. What keeps you up at night? So like we've seen where we can respond well, that Walbridge during pandemic, Point Fire recently, we've suffered the Sonoma Complex fires. What still keeps you up at night or pisses you off?
I get asked this question quite a bit. And what keeps me up at night is not one fire area or one fire prone area. It's that someone that has not got the message yet, someone that hasn't got the message to know their community, know their roads, do mitigation, be involved. The message hasn't reached somebody. And so now they're going to count on me or the fire service, emergency service, law enforcement to come in and do all that we can do to help them. And unfortunately, in these scenarios, there's not much we can do. Think of it this way. Right now, there's no emergency going on in Sonoma County. Me and you can talk about all the things we want to do. We can agree, disagree. We can talk about funding, but we have a lot of options right now. When you call 911 and I show up on your front porch, there's really not too many options I can do. It's like, I'm going to save you. I'm going to try to save your house. Yeah. But in doing that, I'm going to maybe risk my life, risk my friends' lives, and we're maybe going to lose control of a fire because that person was not prepared. So please don't start a fire, manage your vegetation, and look at how your house is built. Those are the things that are going to make a difference.
There was a difficult moment where I was, and you deal with this all the time, is where the people who lose, they've lost everything. And they come up to you and they say, just as much as other people say, you saved me, they say, you failed me. And in one of those, it was during the Kincade, and it was a friend's property, and he was sitting there trying to put out the fire on his own house. And fire trucks went up, but then they turned around and left. And he felt like, abandoned. The tough thing when I spoke to the teams that were there is that every time a firefighter goes up to a place and sees a property and sees if there's fire or whatever they do, they'd have to do an assessment to say, could I save that? I'm not here to save half a house or a quarter of a house if there's another 100 structures that had better vegetation management or are not on fire. And that's not an accusation to an individual or whatever. It's just, I've talked to so many people in your service who say it's a really tough thing, but you have to make split flashpoint decisions. If there's 5 houses that are not ablaze and I drive up and one's ablaze, I need to leave and protect the ones that are around because I can't stop that. Those decisions are being made all the time. That's hard.
Yeah, it really is hard. Yeah. And this is the reality. We got to make split-second decisions, not knowing all the facts.
Yeah.
7 days later, we know a lot more facts. Maybe we could have done something better or different. But when we go to a house, it may be that we're trying to get to 20 other homes at the same time, or we're trying to prioritize. But rest assured, especially the local firefighters, we know our community, we know the residents, we know where people are at. We'd love to help everybody. Yeah. And it hurts most when we can't help the people we know. Now, if I go to a fire in another county or another area of the state comes to help us out, and that's what we do with mutual aid, they don't know our community as well. They might not risk a lot. They might not know where a road's at or a house is at. So they're going to look at it differently. But all the local firefighters, we're part of the community. Our kids play sports here. We participate in fundraisers. We shop here. Yeah. We don't want to see anybody lose a life.
You don't want to see Rudy's house burned down, who you know, or you don't want to see, Alex's or Hank's or, absolutely. These properties. We know what it is. The tough thing that I've seen with you being out with you all night during these fires is, and I appreciate it because my job was never to act like I was a firefighter. My job was to make sure that you all had what you needed, whether it was us getting people out of the way or whether it was helping. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just stay out of the way. Let's just be cognizant of this. But you guys go through a process where number one is life, yes, and then it's property, and then
environment.
Yeah. And then you want to make sure you're managing things and you're not trying to let watersheds get burnt out or, areas of strategic importance. I'll tell you, there's being out with you at times in the fires. There's a couple things that are really crazy to me is that how simple it can be why somebody's house burns. Yes. You've taken me by certain houses, like in the middle of a blaze, where they might have a full radius of defensible space all around their property, and then they left a piece of plywood against a fence, a wooden fence that ended up extending and going underneath an awning on their house. And you and I walked up, and if you did not pull that piece of plywood that was ablaze away, that whole house would have burnt down with 99% resilience built into it.
Yes.
Like that kind of stuff.
Yes. Sometimes it can come down to small stuff. Correct.
But then I've seen I'll never forget seeing bulldoze drivers drive with these things in cages straight into like Hillsburg Ridge, straight into flames. Correct. That looks like hero ball. It's like who on earth would drive a bulldozer straight into an inferno? It looks like they're driving into hell. Who does that?
Crazy bulldozer drivers.
You can see why these guys make shirts, and we've had some crazy bulldozer drivers who have saved our communities at times.
Different people have different comfort levels, and they're They're okay with that. So me or you probably wouldn't do that, but there's things maybe you would do that they wouldn't do.
Oh God, I swear to God. So what do you do for the rest of the year? Okay. You're a rural fire district. Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District is a rural fire district. We talk about fires all the time, but you operate in areas where the roads are called Burnt Mountain Road. Yes. These have burnt, they will burn again. You also operate as a rural fire district. You know, those old visions of firefighters like in metropolitan areas waiting for a call, like playing pool, doing their workouts, doing other things, waiting for calls. What I've seen from you is really in a rural district is changing a culture of your team, which is if you're not responding to a fire, I want you out working with the community members, doing vegetation management, evaluating risks, right?
Correct.
Is that a big part of the difference between driving these big, huge fire stuff? You know what I mean? You don't have the engines that they do in these cities that are responding for the most part. 90% of their calls are life and safety and car crashes and things like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we try to prevent the emergency if ever happening, and then making sure everyone's informed. Don't call me during the emergency for ask what to do. You should already know. So that's the main thing is let's have those conversations now. Let's talk about it. So there's individual preparedness, there's community preparedness, and you mentioned COPE and CERT and different groups, Fire Safe, FireWise. And then there's things we can partner on. We can come out and we call it an inspection, defensible space inspection. Really, it's an assessment. We can come talk to you about what to do with the vegetation around your house, what your house is made of. How about your driveway? How do we get through your gate? How do we hook up to your water supply? What happens if you call 911? We're out there doing vegetation management away from buildings, near homes, evacuation corridors, pods, boundaries. We're doing beneficial fire use. We're willing to partner with pretty much anybody, whatever we can do to prevent the bad day and then be successful during that bad day. We can't just sit around and wait.
No.
We got to be proactive.
Do you fear fire?
No.
Do you like fire?
I like fire.
Do you light fires?
My dream is either I go to respond to fires and make a difference, or I'm lighting fire.
Yeah.
And if I can't light a fire, then I want to do something that's a surrogate or replicates what
So
fire
as somebody
would
who
do.
lights a fire but is not called an arsonist, why do you light fires?
Because fire is natural.
There you go.
The earth evolved with fire. And we got to change how we look at fire. Let's talk about rain. I think people like rain. Do they like when it floods or rains too much in any day? Probably not. That's the same thing about fire. A little bit of fire, not a lot of fire, beneficial fire. Fire is an ecological process. It's a disturbance, just like wind, just like an earthquake. However, it's the only natural process we've chosen to try to stop or eliminate, which has led us to this problem. So the solution...
Decades. I still, the other day, was walking through the square in Hillsburg and saw a smoky thing that said, only you can prevent forest fires. And in many ways now, you are the opposite. You're saying, only you can help me light a good fire when there's no wind and it's not during a drought condition. One of the things that we've learned being in a fire community is that for years afterwards, every time a barbecue goes off, people start calling 911 because they fear the smell of smoke in the air. I want you to respond to this. I feel like a part of your work in doing controlled burns and fire out there is to, in one degree, it's to reduce the risk. Absolutely, that's the primary goal. But the other thing is it reminds people that the smell of smoke is not a fearful and horrible thing. Like we have to adapt our culture that when people know that if there's a fire, it doesn't always mean a bad thing. Do you agree with that?
I agree, because fire's not a binary. It's not good or bad. There's tremendous amount of diversity.
So you have something called the Good Fire Alliance. Can you tell me about that?
That's one of the organizations or movement to encourage more beneficial fire use, more prescribed burning. So it can be pile burning, it can be broadcast burning, it can be a quarter acre, it can be hundreds of acres, thousands of acres. We're not at that scale yet of thousands of acres, but it's the ability to implement beneficial fire. So this would be more a landowner has property they'd like to burn. They can partner with the fire district or CAL FIRE, or they could call a group of volunteers up that are organized to implement prescribed burning, beneficial fire use. So it's getting people back in touch with the land.
Yeah.
You and I can go to the store and buy corn, but what about growing our own corn? It's about getting people back in touch with how nature works, understanding fire. And then so ultimately they're not going to be afraid if they smell smoke, if they see flames. They're going to realize it's a backing fire. It's not threatening. And those are the terms we use. So it's a movement to put beneficial fire back on the landscape, ecological. We know Native Americans did historically. We know Mother Nature did it historically.
Lightning.
Absolutely.
I mean, in some ways, we had the Walbridge fire, which was a lightning-initiated storm, as you've said, maybe the only one that we can think of in recent memory.
It's because we were so good at putting out all the other ones.
Yeah.
In that year, there was too many fires,
Yeah.
and we didn't put out two of them, Walbridge and Myers, and everyone
But once
talks about
again,
it now.
no loss of life.
No loss of life.
Huge amount of acres burned. Structures lost, unfortunately, but not catastrophic because we get out of your way. We get out of your way, and so that you don't have to save us, that you can save our homes and you can save ecological areas and you can do things in watersheds. Marshall, well, first of all, I think it's always great that your name is Marshall and people think of the word as a fire marshal. My son, during one of the fires, he sent me.
Still got it.
Yeah, Paw Patrol had Marshall was was the fire guy, and I gave that to you. We've done so much work in the community, but we've also battled so much bureaucracy, and then we've really either skirted it on the outside or gotten it done. There's so many things I could get into right now, but I really want to refine us on this idea of where we're at. Like, once again, I want to talk about fire and then have us, culminate on what people can do and what we need to focus on. Fire is an amazing element. It's the most scary for most people, right? Element that exists. It's also described as extremely beautiful. I talked to a dear friend of ours, a mutual friend, Scott, who's out in Knights Valley. As his second home burnt down, he lost a property in the Oakland Hills fire, and then he lost his family's property ranch out in Knights Valley. He told me when that fire came over, it was also this terrorizing moment, but it was also the most beautiful, crazy thing he'd ever seen. He said this fire looked like it looked like a horse galloping, and then at another point it rose up like a dragon, and how it moved with wind and how it moved over contours of land. Just, he sat there as it went over him, and it was a horrifying experience, but just a fascinating thing that people don't get to see. What can you tell us about fire? Help us understand fire.
Well, I'll start off with some trivia. First off, Earth is the only planet that we know of that has fire. And that's primarily because of the oxygen content of Earth, which allows you and I to exist as humans. It also allows fire to occur because we need the fire triangle: heat, oxygen, and fuel. So fire always has occurred on the Earth, lightning, volcanoes, and then we came along as humans, and we used fire. Native Americans used fire, but we tried to control fire. We brought it in our house for fireplaces and cooking, but we deemed it as a terror on the outside, threatening our homes, threatening lives. And so about 1910, there was the big blow up in the northern Rocky Mountains. It's where Ed Pulaski got his fame in Wallace, Idaho, for saving people in a cave. But about 1910, there was a study, United States Geological Service in 1899, that said all fire was bad with no redeeming qualities. And since 1910, we had the Japanese firebomb, we had the Depression with the Civilian Conservation Corps. California specifically mobilized in full suppression, not fire management, not allowing fires to happen, but put all fires out at all costs. And so we're now 100 plus years into that movement. We've seen the accumulation of vegetation or land management. No management is not land management. That just allows things to continue to grow. We continue to put out the easy fires, the flames that are only a couple inches tall, fires barely spreading. Almost anybody can put that fire out. So we're very successful on those days. So what's happening now is most of our acres are burning under these extreme conditions, which then means high intensity, high severity. And luckily not here, but in the Sierras, we're seeing the giant sequoias possibly going extinct because of how those fires are burning now. And I would hate to see that here in Sonoma County with our redwoods, our vineyards, everything else unique to Sonoma County. So that's a little bit of the, uniqueness about fire. So we either need to do beneficial fire, burning on our terms, increasing the possibility that more landscape can burn naturally or historically as it would 200, 500,000 years ago. And that also means becoming fire adapted, where people have their homes not fireproof, because there's no such thing as fireproof, but fire resistant, and having a plan to evacuate, being part of their community, having the evacuation notices, and being part of the team. It's not me. Don't call me during the emergency. This is what we started with. It's us working together.
Yeah.
It's us being resilient. It's all of us working together.
Well, and you can do everything and it still doesn't work. Right? You'll get out there on the landscape. I mean, we had a situation where you and we were building these COPE and CERT teams, these citizens organized to prepare for emergencies. And then they'd rise up to a higher level and get certifications to be community emergency response teams. And we created these evacuation zones. One of those areas was in Mill Creek.
Yes.
And some of the people who did the most work had their houses burned down.
Yep.
And others who didn't do any of the work, their houses were saved. You can't control the world, but you can make sure that you are prepared the best. That's the only thing that drives me nuts. I was one time quoted in the paper because I was so frustrated. We did a compliance check of properties in Sonoma County, and after our big fires, there was only 30% compliance. And I publicly said I'm pissed at my own constituents and got raised for it in the newspapers and stuff. But the reality is that it did piss me off that people weren't waking up and that they expected you to save them, or they came up to me and said, "Hey, why don't you get more fire on the ground?" And I'm like, have you changed your the eaves in your you've put vulcanized? Okay, during these fires, what percent of fires, the homes that burn down, are because of embers and ember cast?
I'm going to answer that both from what science says and also my personal experience, and then local knowledge.
Yeah.
It's mostly from embers.
Yeah.
That means an ember gets in an attic vent, open window, open door, and catches the house on fire. And that's the result of how the house is built or the structure is built, and also how the vegetation immediate to the structure, called defensible space, is maintained, but also how their land is maintained. If we get a scenario like Coffee Park, Fountain Grove, where there's high density houses or houses that are 10 to 20 feet from one another, that's more of a building to building.
Yeah.
2018 Campfire.
You call that radiant,
Eaton
right?
Palisades, radiant. Yeah. And that's another scenario, but that's not embers.
But the reason that happened was because of the embers. I mean, if you can look back,
The first house got going.
what we've talked about is that, Mark West Springs Road, which is, let's speak about the tubs, was this blowtorch that this wind coming through, this wind event. And those, when people were coming off the hill, it wasn't a firewall, it was mortar. Like, these embers were pushing so far in front. So anybody who was out there that night talks about how there wasn't a fire or a fire line. There was hundreds of fires starting everywhere. And then those got into some of the eaves down in Mark West. And then all of a sudden, once that ignited a house, that house burnt 3 houses. Those 3 houses burnt 30. Those 30 burnt down 200. Then those embers go over the freeway to Coffee Park. And now all of a sudden, miles down, you're getting the same thing, right? So it's kind of a crazy thing, because you'd say, yeah, it ultimately radiant, like building to building, did it. But the whole reason was the ember cast, what you call it. For you, and if you're thinking about this kind of work and what you do each and every day, a lot of your life is not in these high incident moments, these dopamine, adrenaline, crazy moments. It's keeping people motivated to go out and work every day. It's not when they're running up a hill, but getting your volunteers or your staff going and running up and down, sweating their butts off so they're ready for game day. What's the culture like these days for firefighters in an area like we have, where they have gone through so much, and you have new people who are coming in and people care, but it's also well-funded and well-organized now, whereas 10 years ago, you were operating on a lower capacity? What's the difference in the culture of the fire world now compared to before Tubbs?
Yeah, there's a couple things we could talk about here if we want to use a sport analogy. The firefighters are ready for game day.
Yeah.
We're preparing for that all the time.
Yeah.
What's changed is, for good, and I honestly want people to put me out of business, or don't have games for me. We're having less and less game days. And that's because people are not starting fires. Power lines are being de-energized. We're doing a tremendous amount of work in stopping fires in the first place. We're still getting ready for game day. But if you go back and look at 2017, that's going to, 9 years ago at this point almost. There's a lot of new firefighters that weren't around. They don't know. They just hear folklore stories or me and you talking about it. They weren't there firsthand.
It still
They
feels
didn't
like
see it.
yesterday to us.
Absolutely, yeah. And in the names we talk about Mill Creek, I was talking about, I immediately thought about the people that lost their houses. I know them by name.
Yeah, I know them by name.
And so that's what's also changed is some of the players have changed, but we're constantly preparing for game day. Some of the big changes that have happened now is we can have more firefighters on call, on duty. So we can send a stronger, more amount of people, more amount of fire trucks in that initial response.
Mm-hmm.
They're local. They know the area. That's a huge advantage. So we have upstaffing, more firefighters available on duty. The state with aircraft has increased aircraft capacity, including nighttime flying. Nighttime flying didn't exist in 2017.
During the point fire, I think we had the first nighttime drops.
That was the first time in Sonoma County.
And you and others told me that in the days before all these climate intense events is that fires used to sit down more at night. But with these Diablo winds that we've had, which are coming out of the Northeast, coming out of desert lands. I mean, when we've had these significant wind events, it's still blowing at 85 to 95 degrees at night during these events, right? I mean, this is different.
Yeah, and I can give you two examples. If you want to compare the 2004 Geysers fire to the 2019 Kincade, 2004 Geysers fire starts in a similar area, no evacuations, never makes it to 128.
Good Lord.
Way different story 15 years before. And then you look at 1964 Hanley compared to 2017 Tubbs. That fire went from the top of Mount St. Helena. There used to be a Christmas tree farm up there. Took about 24 hours to make it over to Montecito, Santa Rosa area, Shenate. Well, in Tubbs, it started about 10 o'clock at night, similar area on Tubbs Lane by Calistoga, and it was in Coffee Park by 1 a.m. So these fires, and I don't know all the reasons, but it's curing of vegetation, drought, wind conditions. They're moving much more quicker, and we are becoming much less effective.
One of the things that I've often said over the years is that the fact that you have a title that says you're a firefighter is almost dangerous because we do not have earthquake fighters.
Correct.
We don't have hurricane fighters, tornado fighters, tsunami fighters. So people think because we have a firefighter that you can save them from all of these natural disasters. But the ironic thing is that what I also remind myself of over these years, what you all have taught me is that as much as we talk about this as a fire, the natural disaster was the wind event.
Correct.
That's the wind event. That's the thing that turns a fire into a natural disaster. When you get 100-mile-an-hour desert winds coming through that sustain significantly, all you can do is get people out of the way and do your best until that event calms down. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Like you can't fight a fire in the middle of Coffee Park when it's 40 to 60-mile-an-hour winds on the ground and up on the peaks, it's 100 and 110 degrees. You can't stop embers from flying, right?
Correct. Yep, nothing we can do. The only way to be successful is we are literally standing there when the fire starts and we start putting it out right away. And that's just not practical either.
You told me, back to these kind of crazy things about fires, is that you were in Coffee Park that night when you saw the tornadoes. Can you talk about what that's like? I mean, what the heck is a fire tornado?
That was the first time I've ever seen it.
You've heard about them.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but not in an urban area. I've seen them in the wildland area.
Mm-hmm.
But this was, and I tried to capture some of it on videos, because it wasn't like there was just one tornado always occurring.
Mm-hmm.
It would just happen every maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory was it was because the number of homes that were burning, vehicles that were burning, the amount of heat that needed to rise.
Yeah.
And it was causing that rotation. But there was
and then the winds coming through
and
these.
and the winds were in all directions then. So we had embers going everywhere. It was just crazy. Like I'd never seen it before like that in an urban area. And I'd been to urban area fires before, urban configurations, but nothing to that extent. And there was also, when I looked around, there was no other firefighters. We were stretched so thin.
Yeah. The, it's fascinating to sit with you and have a totally different story now. Like I've called it a tale of two fires, really, in between the Sonoma complex and the Tubbs, and then 2 years later with Kincade. But we can't always expect to have Kincade. We can't expect to be the only fire in the state where we have 4,000 firefighters. And I mean, remind me what the equipment and the individuals that we had when we were there.
On the Kincade?
Yeah.
It was over 6,000 firefighters.
Yeah. And hundreds of, so many.
All the airplanes we wanted.
So many airplanes and so many fire engines that we didn't even know what to do. It was a whole logistical pattern for you to figure that out. So we can't expect that either, right? Those are two kind of very opposite areas. But the organization and what you see in other communities outside of us, do you see rapid adaptation like we've done? I mean, it took us getting hit in the face to adapt our system completely. And I say this because one of my things is that I try to shake other people who are in counties or in other county officials or in other areas and say, learn from our lesson. Don't wait until this hits you in the face. Test your alert and warning systems. Go do cope and cert before it's a problem. It's harder because people aren't fearful to bring them to the table to do all these things, but resilience is the way, not response.
Correct.
What do you see out there in the wider community?
So I don't know every community well, but I do talk with other states. No one has it figured out.
Yeah.
And to me, and I don't know if you would agree, I think it all comes back to grassroots community organizations.
Yeah.
You know, you and I as government, we can only do so much. We can offer products, we can offer services, but if they're not embraced or developed with the community, they're not going to be utilized. So your block captain program in Larkfield, Coffee Park, the CERT, the COPE, all that got us, I would say, well, first off, for the individual, it gave them a sense of community again. They got to know their neighbors. They didn't even know their neighbors before.
They didn't even know their neighbors.
They didn't know to sign up for the alerts. So first off, they got to know their neighbors on a common cause, but everything else aside, hey, how can we work together?
Yeah.
So it brought them together. Then it allows me and you to then say, well, we got these things we can do for you, or what should we change? And that's how I think, you know, when we think about what we've done in this county, and I can't take credit for it all, I'm mainly a responder, but the evacuation zones, the alert system, you know, we even talked about sirens at one time. It didn't pencil out, but it was looked at. Like all things were thrown out to look at.
Yeah, we tested it. I remember you. Yeah. Well, let's go back to this. That was an example of where we, as representing institutions, me as the county, you with the fire district, we did a better job as facilitators and organizers than we did as the doers. They needed to be the doers. The fact that you would host them to meet in your building, the fact that I offered a staff member, at that point his name was Stuart, to go in and take notes and organize them, because I woke up probably 4 or 5 months after our initial big Sonoma complex fires and said, holy crap, we're just I was petrified. Like, we got to get ready for the next one, because there's all these communities that were now fearful and they needed a place to put it. So, you know, that's the work that's needed.
But back to that original question, I think that's what I haven't seen what we have here in any other county. It's not me and you pushing a product or trying to sell something. It's the community wants to engage us. And that I've not seen that elsewhere.
Yeah, so. It's something, if I could replicate anything around this country, it'd be that right there. And also before you have to do it, you know, before you get blown out. And I think it can be done. I think that this is the reason this was such a horrific series of events, but so inspiring, is that we were able to bring people around common cause. Like, as you say, these were not Republican and Democrat issues. These are not, you know, philosophical divides, religious things like that people spend all their time talking about. This was common cause, neighbor to neighbor. Marshall, we've taken a good chunk of time talking. We've talked about fires and fire habits. We've talked about like how we're such a different place now and where we're at organizationally, action-wise, all the things that we're doing. One of my biggest things is making sure we don't fall into complacency again. How do we not fall into complacency? Because as you and I said, you have new firefighters who haven't seen it before. It's lore. We have new county leadership, and I was realizing that our top 3 positions in the county are wonderful individuals who may have dealt with these in other areas, but not here. And so we need to go through exercises. We need to keep testing stuff. We can't delete positions that do this mitigation work. Like when the budget crunch happens, what's your thoughts on how we do not go into complacency?
And I talk about this also quite a bit. So my theory, comparing the 64 handling to the 2017 tubs, is we were developing the Community Wildfire Protection Plan before 2017. And we'd go to community meetings and talk about, hey, this fire happened and now there's homes there. And we got the response, oh, that'll never happen again. And it's because we forget. Yeah. So my kids, their high school burned down. They lost friends' house, but they got to not forget. And I don't know how we do that without, scaring people. We inform people. We make them aware that, hey, this area could flood. There could be earthquakes. We just got to keep informing them. And my bias is we don't forfeit ground. We keep getting ready for game day. Game day never happens. That's great too, but we cannot forfeit what we gained, what we learned. How do we do it? I don't know. It's partly combating human nature.
Yeah, but I think a part of it is that the urgency to be prepared had gone out of our systems. If I look back, that's the one thing I would say. I mean, I sat down with some of our emergency managers, and they went through, this is a hazard mitigation plan, Mr. Supervisor, when I onboarded. But we weren't reviewing that stuff before the board. We weren't getting full briefings. We weren't in the public and in the community. And I think around the country, the problem is that most people who go around, they expect government, which they don't trust a lot, to protect them. And so my thing is that you just got to be loud, and you got to do it. You got to go back to there being people knowing that risk exists. First of all, as you said before, I had to do stop, drop, and roll and do earthquake stuff when I was in school growing up. I think that stuff needs to keep happening. I think the institutions need to push people and remind them that they're responsible, because otherwise you'll be held responsible and accountable. Anything you want to finish on? Anything you want to say to the community about what we can do and how we need to, what they need to do, how they can get in touch with the movement? Yeah,
I mean, I would just say, stay involved, stay prepared, ask questions, come to meetings, be part of your community.
Be part of your community.
Look at what government can offer. How can you work with government? Get to know your firefighters by name. Call me Marshall. I don't need to be the chief. So when we respond in an emergency, we have worked together before, and we know what to do, and you're going to know that we're trying to do the best to help you. That's what I just want to remind people. And then in our last couple minutes here, also the partnership we've had, the friendship we've had. I know you're moving on, but all the great stuff we've been able to do, because, I can only do so much. We got to get someone else to get involved. At some point, I'm not going to be the fire chief no more. Where does this all go? How does this stuff live on? Because, well, maybe we should make a time capsule, but I don't think that's the right answer either. But we got to make sure the community stays safe, and so that my grandkids, my kids who all live in the community don't have a bad day, or they're at least prepared for that bad day.
They're prepared. You got to have a plan. You got to be prepared. I tell people every day that the process of going from getting hammered and then becoming Sonoma strong afterwards, Lahaina strong, Paradise strong, LA strong, that all transitions then into Sonoma ready, right? And we were saying like preparedness. But then I even think about it from another aspect, is you can't always live ready. You got to pay your professionals to be paranoid, but everybody can't live with that all the time. And then you got to be like, how do you get into that resolve, which is like Sonoma safe, or these other communities, Paradise safe, where you've done everything resilient. You can. Yeah, where you've done everything you can, and then you live your life. Yes. If you're prepared, then you don't have to sit up and ring, every time there's a wind event or something. There's systems in place. There's stuff but I want to go back to the thing that you said is the most important. Be a part of your community.
Absolutely.
These brought our community closer than ever. And the only reason that that Kincade was a different answer and these other ones is because it isn't just government doing better. It's the nonprofits, it's the community groups, it's the neighbor-to-neighbor relations. It's all that work.
Yep. So and that was on Walbridge, correct? Right? The Mill Creek community.
It's amazing.
Yeah, there was the official evacuation warnings and orders and notifications, but it was that community having their own group texting that they assured everybody got out. And that's something government can never do.
Because there's never going to be that confidence. Even if you do it right, you are part of an institution that people lack trust in. Even though they expect a lot out of it, they lack trust in.
Yep.
I want to thank you for being an amazing partner. It's an honor to have been through firestorms with you. I appreciate you so deeply, man. Thank you for the partnership and the friendship.
Thank you.
Yeah.